Welcome to Playful Podcast, your guide into the underground scene where we discover topics on kink and electronic music every week. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss out on our next episode. We are here today with Ariana, better known as DJ Volvox. Volvox is based in New York and a dominant force on the underground techno scene with regular appearances at Berghain, for example, known for high energy sets. In our conversation, we talk about the kink versus techno scene, safety for queer people, and changes she wishes to see in the future, amongst much more. I'm Amanda, and this is Playful Podcast. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much.
When did you fly in?
I arrived on Monday.
On Monday?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna...
Should I move over?
No, like that's perfect. Yeah. On Monday, all right. And then you're gonna be in Europe for some time?
Yeah, thankfully I'm here for the rest of the summer. I kind of took a little bit of time off in June, which was actually really nice.
Yeah.
And just kind of didn't work every weekend and got ready for this period, which I have a lot of really big shows coming up.
Festival period.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in the past, like I would be in Europe throughout the summer, like back and forth. So, but things are a little more just messy with bookings and the festivals and shows getting canceled and changing. And there's just a lot of a lot more uncertainty in the booking. And party realm in general.
Since COVID?
Yeah, since COVID, and also because of the war, and just like a lot of things are just disorganized.
Oh yeah.
And I think that fewer people are going out, from what I hear. I mean, everything that I have played has been successful. But I've heard of a lot of other shows that people have getting canceled. I think that maybe I booked a little bit less because promoters in Europe were not so certain about having to commit to bringing artists from the United States, because if they had to cancel, there were all these other sunk costs that they were going to lose out on. But on the other hand, the good news is that, you know, my career's gotten to the point where I'm working with a lot of larger promoters. And so, you know, they make plans well in advance and they keep their plans, you know, like Awakenings Festival is going to happen. Like Berghain is going to happen. And so thankfully, that's all stayed, you know, the course, and it's coming through like as planned. And I think that, you know, I used to play for a lot of smaller promoters and they all seem to have disappeared. And I think maybe a lot of them went out of business, unfortunately.
That's so sad.
And so that's just like an unfortunate aspect of what's happened because of COVID. But yeah, like at the same time, you know, all of these opportunities for these greater things have kind of fallen into place that were supposed to happen back in maybe like 2020, but you know, because like I said, when I joined Triangle, we were like, you know, on a path to really kind of get there, and then we had to wait 2 years, and it was sort of like, but you know, I took those 2 years to continue to refine my sound and just prepare myself for what was ahead, and so now we're finally getting there again.
Exactly.
You know? Just had to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah. But a well-needed vacation anyway you had.
Yeah, I mean, I was not mad to just stay home for some time, I have to be honest. Like, it definitely got depressing after, like, you know, the months went on and on. I thought it was going to be over in, like, a year, you know?
Yeah, oh God.
And,
I thought 3 months.
Right.
Very naive.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, I was, like, spending money like it was going to be over. I was just, like, you know, buying takeout and shopping online. And I was like, this is going to be whatever, you know? And then when it didn't end, after the first year, I was like, you know, because I spent a lot of money and just was like not budgeting.
And the skin started to itch. Like, I mean, yeah, at least for me, I was like, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to chill. I mean, like I had been on tour internationally nonstop since 2015, like when I broke through. So it's funny / scary because I have to admit that before it happened, I sort of did wish that the world would maybe stop turning.
Yeah.
And then it did. And I was like, okay, just kidding. So that was welcome in a way. But yeah, once it dragged on into the second year, it got really depressing.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I'm thankful that I had a partner that could sort of like kick my butt and get me off the couch and like get me doing things again. And, you know, of course, the whole like streaming era was a nightmare. And I was not comfortable to stream from my house.
No.
And, you know, I was just like, DJs are already expected to share so much of themselves online. I was like, what my house looks like is not your business.
No,
like,
yeah.
I'm not interested in being judged by that, whether positively or negatively.
No.
And yeah, that was just like too much. So
Yeah.
like, you know, I agreed to do streamings and podcasts that could be like at a club or like, you know, just a podcast, like, you know, regular DJ mix. But yeah, all of that streaming from home, I was like, absolutely not.
It feels like you have a lot of integrity. Like, what are some other words that you would describe yourself with?
I mean, I would definitely say I'm driven. I would definitely say I'm questioning. I would definitely say I'm hedonistic. You know, I think that what brought me to dance music as a career was really just love of dance and fun and partying. You know, even since I was a very young child, I was drawn to music and, you know, there was a lot of music in my home. My parents weren't musicians, but they just liked music. And so, you know, I can think of like, you know, even when I was very, very young, there's a video of me dancing as like a toddler to Madonna's True Blue album. And I was just like going in and my mom was like, I don't know, she just started doing this. And I feel like since then I've just been drawn to music, I guess, that was danceable. You know, like in the early 90s, there was so much pop music that was house inspired, you know, like Paula Abdul and, you know, Technotronic and just like whatever, like pop radio was very dance oriented. Like a lot of, you know, this music that was just on, that I was just hearing as a child. And I was just really drawn to that. And as soon as I could go to dance events, you know, like my middle school dance, I went to every single middle school dance. And then I went to every single high school dance. And then by the time I was maybe like 15, 16, I was kind of getting involved in like alternative scenes and like alternative music, like goth and industrial. And there were shows at clubs that I could go to, like goth clubs. And then, you know, I would just like hide in the bathroom after the all ages show and just like stay for the club night afterwards. So I don't know, something about nightlife just really attracted me and kind of like the fantasy but mostly the music and just kind of being able to go out and have fun and dance.
Didn't get tired.
I never got tired. You know, it was funny. I went to my first rave in the year 2000. My friends took me there. And I was pretty naive about drugs in general at that point.
Where was it?
This would be in Buffalo, New York. So I was born in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, but my parents moved to Buffalo, New York, which is where my mother was from, when I was 2 years old because of a really out of control financial, economic, and political situation in Brazil. In the mid-'80s, Brazil was being run by a military dictatorship. There was a run on the banks. Like, it was just, like, really messy. So my parents, with a 2-year-old baby who had just lost their life savings due to these banks, moved to the U.S. and were supported by my mother's parents. And so I grew up in Buffalo, which is, like, you know, it was a cute city, upstate New York. It's close to Toronto. But, you know, it was like a Rust Belt city, which means that it was a very prosperous city in like the 20s when like industry was growing in like the northeastern United States. And when that sort of era ended, the city experienced a tremendous decline. And so it was a city that had a lot of income disparity, a lot of racial disparity. But nonetheless, you know, I was kind of growing up in the suburbs. And so I had an experience that was very idyllic and like very privileged in that sense. But Buffalo was a place where there were lots of warehouses and like empty storefronts. And so that created an opportunity for culture to expand into those spaces. And so there was a lot of music, industrial music, bands. Buffalo is very known for hardcore music, although that was never really my scene particularly. I know there's a lot of famous bands from that scene there. And yeah, raves. There were lots of really, really huge raves. And so I started going to raves in the year 2000 with my friends. And I was just...
How old were you then?
I was 15 in the year
15,
2000.
Yeah.
Young
little raver.
Yeah. And so, you know, I had really good grades in school and my parents were like, okay, you want to do this? You have good grades. We're going to drop you off and we're going to pick you up. just to see how this is all going to go down, right?
Eyes are on you.
Yeah. And I was just so happy to have an opportunity to go somewhere to dance for 12 hours straight. And I really just had the energy to do that. And like when I think back, I realized that maybe some of my friends were taking stuff, but they never gave it to me for whatever reason. Like, and so I just...
Were you hanging out with older kids?
No, they were all high schoolers as well.
Ah, okay. Uh-huh.
A lot of these raves were all ages. And so you could, they'd X your hands or something like that. And you could go. Because, they weren't necessarily about selling alcohol. I guess there were bars. I honestly can't even remember. I just remember like music, big room, outfits, candy. People had like all their looks and everyone was always so friendly. And, there were all the different styles of music, techno, trance, house, drum and bass, ambient. And
oh wow, what a place to explore your own musical taste.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
That was a really cool experience. And like, I mean, for example, like I remember the first time I went into a drum and bass room and I didn't know what to do with my body. I was like, I don't know how to dance to this music. And that's the first time that's ever happened because, I think that, being born in Brazil, Brazilian culture is just so focused around dance and movement and enjoyment and happiness. I feel like that's just something that just comes out of me naturally. And so not knowing what to do with my body is like not a problem that I had ever had before. So that was very funny. And I remember that so clearly because it was just so different from what I had experienced until then. But yeah, so I went to raves and then kind of started moving into kind of more like darker culture and sounds. And kind of by the time I was graduating from high school, I was already like very well entrenched in the idea that like nightlife was my thing and like what I did. And so when it came time to choose where to go to college, I was looking at colleges in Indiana and Chicago and in Massachusetts, in Boston. And basically I ended up choosing Boston because the clubbing age in Chicago was 21.
Smart.
And I was like, I'm not going to wait 3 years. I'm not going to stop going to clubs for 3 years. Like, that's not going to work for me. So I went to Boston and I had a really great experience there. I was already very savvy about being online. And like back then, it was kind of like pre what we would consider to be social media today. But there were websites like LiveJournal where you could write about your life and connect with other people that you didn't necessarily know. And so I ended up seeking out people on LiveJournal that were in this goth industrial scene. And
you were early with new trends, like, or were you always on top of social media channels and getting friends online and these kind of things?
Like I was like a cyber kid on the internet.
Yeah.
I think that like even when I was in middle school, I don't know, I had a moment where I realized that I just didn't want to listen to what other people listen to.
Yeah.
And like, I don't really know where that came from. I just like had a moment. And that was also kind of when the internet was really becoming a place where you could access music for free, like Napster and stuff like that. So jumping back, that kind of is how I got started in just like knowing about alternative music. I mean, like electronica was also really popular, in the late 90s. We're talking like 1997, 1998, 1999. The Prodigy had like a huge album, The Fat of the Land. That was a really big album for me. The Crystal Method, Moby, all of that stuff I was listening to, in addition to other like R&B and rock and roll and punk rock. That was kind of like all that kind of late 90s soundscape. And so alternative music was sort of something that was kind of in the mainstream. And so I guess I just followed the mainstream versions of, alternative music and electronic dance into something that was truly alternative and underground. And
it feels also like the goth community or like subcultures in general were bigger on social media when it started because of seeking people who were like-minded.
That's true. And actually, I also had that experience because I discovered the music before I really discovered the community. And so for a long time, I sort of just like listened to this music, but like on my own. And then, you know, my dad, who always kind of helped me, my dad was very into computers, and we had computers at my house like early on. And so he exposed me to this technology, and he gave me access to the internet and sort of let me do whatever I wanted on it. And I definitely did some stuff. But mostly was just, like seeking people that were interesting and like-minded. I definitely was part of like several different communities online. Like, you know, even like as a teenager or even younger, I was like really into Sailor Moon, and I found like Sailor Moon fans online. And so we would connect. And then later on, through kind of like the goth industrial scene, you know, like all of these like plastic hair extensions and like all of these kind of like fantastical accessories that were part of what was called like the cyber goth look, which was kind of like what I was into. There was a hair forum online with a lot of the girls from London, and the girls from London were kind of where this look was all happening. And so I ended up connecting with them and being part of this forum where everyone like exchanged tips and styling and like sourcing for all of these, like, you know, the plastic tubing and how to make dreads out of synthetic hair, and just kind of sharing photos of everyone, you know, their looks going out. And I was actually like too young to really even go out. I mean, I was just barely a teenager, but I was just obsessed with the looks and how it all came together. And you know, I knew everything about all the latex designers of London, even though like I couldn't afford latex clothes and I couldn't go to clubs either. But I just discovered all this online, and it was just so magical and fantastical and beautiful. And so kind of by the time I was able to actually participate in this community, I had already like fully nerded out over like what it was all about.
Awesome.
And so it was great, you know, by the time, so when I moved to Boston for college, I was seeking that community already, and I found it. And when I arrived there, I had a lot to offer. You know, I was young, I made outfits, I was going to art school. I would make looks and put like electronic elements like LEDs and silicone and, you know, rivet things together. And I would basically just make outfits for the club. And that helped me stand out, and I met a lot of people. And because I was so much into dancing and performing, it just kind of grew naturally. I think that, you know, going to the club 3 days a week, paying $15 a pop was expensive for a college student. And so I started to try to think about ways that maybe I could subsidize my clubbing. And so I started looking for a job, and the club that I was going to at the time was this club called Man Ray. And it had been open for 25 years already in Boston. And it was like a goth, gay, industrial, alternative space. And so I got a job as a flyer girl. And, you know, so my job was to flyer the crowd at the end of the night when flyers were still a thing.
They were like, with that outfit, she's perfect. She's going to get
exactly.
the exact...
She'll talk to everybody, you know, it's just like da, 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 da. So that was my first job. And so then I was like working for a promoter at the club. So then they were letting me in for free. And then after some time, I got another job at that club as a go-go dancer. Because again, like I was making all my outfits, and I would always do makeup and hair and like had all these looks. So they were like, okay, so you dance on the block, and, you know, for 30 minutes at a time. And there were maybe like a rotation of dancers. And then I was getting paid to be at the club. And that was great. I also kind of got into...
How old were you then?
At that point, I was in college, so I was 19, actually.
Yeah.
Because the club in Boston wouldn't let you in until you were 19. So
all
19,
right.
Let's say 20. And there was also a crew, the same friends who kind of I met at this club, used to also do coordinated dance performances to industrial music with like costumes. You know, kind of like the goth and fetish clubs of the 80s sort of had a strong kind of cabaret vibe to them. So like at this club, you know, throughout the night, the music would stop and there would be performances on stage, whether it was like a dominatrix or just a dance performance that we would do or a fashion show. And so I was part of these dance performances for a while, and that was always really enjoyable. And, you know, through that experience, I was always spending a lot of time listening to what the DJs were doing and how they were doing it. And it just got to a point where I was just kind of like, I could do this. Like, I want to do this. Can I do this? And I was just very lucky to have a very supportive group of friends. And they were like, yeah, you can do this. And we're going to get you started. They pulled some money together and they got me a little unit. It was called a Newmark CD Mix 2. And it's 2 pop-out trays with like tiny little 2-inch jog wheels. And that's how I started DJing. And they gave me my first gig at like a local bar. And it was really great. You know, I think that Boston is a really special place. It's a very intellectual city. You know, there's a lot of colleges and obviously Harvard and MIT. And so I think that I managed to avoid a lot of the, you know, like people say, and especially women in this industry say that they experience so much difficulty getting started and finding a place and so much pushback. And I really didn't experience any of that. Like there were also a lot of women in my scene that were in positions of power or just making things happen. And so in a sense, I mean, I think that the goth industrial scene really was like ahead of the curve in that sense, in many ways, you know? I also think that the goth industrial scene was sort of exploring queerness and gender identity without really talking about it that way. You know, like men were really feminine and wore eyeliner.
Obvious.
It was just the look. That was just the vibe, you know? And like for me being into industrial, you know, industrial style was like hard and shaved head and like girls were like really tough. And like that kind of, I realize now was sort of like the beginning of me recognizing those aspects of myself. And so I feel really lucky that I had an opportunity to grow up in an atmosphere like that. And like a lot of the people at Man Ray also were older, you know, they were goths in the 80s. And so I was partying with a lot of people that were already in their 40s that sort of like had their lives together, like were doctors or worked in pharmacy or you know, education. And so I think that a lot of the aspects that are kind of dangerous or like negative or like can get dark about nightlife now, especially in Berlin, it just wasn't that intense. It wasn't that crazy, you know? The party was over at like 2 a.m. and everybody went home, or we had an after party. But like it didn't have the levels, the levels that I think that a lot of clubbing has now in New York and Berlin and everywhere in the world, you know? So I think that I was saved or protected from kind of what could go wrong.
Early on,
when I was young.
Don't have the same judgmental like.
Exactly.
All right. Would you say you're spiritual?
Yeah, I think that.
Anyway.
Yeah, I definitely have like a strong spiritual sense.
I just sensed that when I read some interviews about you and about you were talking about gardening and taking. You know, there's something about. Also, I believe there's. A lot of musicians have a feeling about energy, creating a vibe, creating energy, and that's why I think it's also interesting.
So, you know, my mother was a very alternative person. She was a healer, and actually my father's sister, my aunt, was also a healer. So I feel like I inherited kind of some ancestral, you know, just like knowledge and experience and talent that I was also very lucky to have these two people that could explain to me, like, what this was and how to work with it, because this is what they did in their careers as well. So, you know, my mother raised me with a lot of kind of alternative viewpoints because she herself had to do a lot of unlearning for her from her Catholic upbringing. And so my mother always made very sure that I never was imposed by any like ideology that made me feel bad, or that like, you know, the idea that my body was bad, or that like sin was like a thing that was, you know, I had to think about. I was really raised with a lot of sort of ideas from Buddhism and anthroposophy and paganism, kind of all just like mashed up. I went to Waldorf school. Which is sort of like an alternative kind of system of schooling for young people to develop like imagination. And so I just grew up in an environment very kind of like hippie in a way that just like encouraged creativity and play and self-discovery. And so that also was kind of a space that was very protective for me. And so I was sort of just allowed to kind of be free and, wear costumes and play and just have fun as a kid. And so I realized that it just sort of made me a very kind of like embodied and kind of open person that didn't have to really go through a lot of unlearning like many others do as adults. And so, like even as like a teen, I identified as bisexual, but like it wasn't such a big deal. I was just like, interested in what I was interested in. And again, like when I started like dressing alternatively and going to raves and going to clubs and, just kind of being an active teen, my parents were, keeping an eye on me, but my grades were always good. And so they were like, all right, she's serious. We can't really say anything, because like this all seems to be on the up and up. And so I think that I had a lot of freedom to just sort of explore life. And Buffalo had enough, it had enough of all these things to have fun without it being overwhelming. And I think I just had a natural sense of responsibility to not kind of go crazy with it.
Was there ever anything that was, because it seems like you had so much freedom to try your own ways and also not being judged and being welcome as a woman to the scene and all this. What's been the toughest thing in your career?
Honestly, the toughest parts of the career, I think right now are social media and how much we are expected to promote ourselves. I find like self-promotion to be very difficult. Like I love to do my art and I love to live my life, but the levels of like self-ego and just kind of like extra attention that is sort of required in this industry to rise up, I find really challenging for myself because I just not the kind of person that like wants to draw that kind of attention all the time. I can be kind of a private person. Like I'm not really comfortable just doing whatever all the time. And so I do find that to be a struggle. Again, because like I kind of am giving something to people that comes from a very private and sensitive place. I've gotten very far, just being a DJ, just being, this and that. But I think it's because people respond to the power that I bring to what I do. And so it's getting to a point now where I'm really like at a level where the people around me are businesses, like it's not just like a girl with a computer. I am literally just a girl with a computer. Like I don't have a manager. I don't have like PR. I don't have like stylists. I don't have people like telling me, oh, you should do this, you should do that. I don't have people like necessarily bringing, all sorts of opportunities my way. Like it's me, people I meet, people that believe in me and that want to support me. And my agency does a great job, and I really appreciate that. And I have been supported by artists along the way. DVS1 was basically responsible for connecting me with Triangle. And so, there are artists out there. I know like he's also very outspoken about doing it a different way and, kind of being real and being against kind of a lot of this like aggrandizing self-promotion. And so, like I just hope that we can create space for other artists that also don't really want to do all that or don't, just can't for many reasons.
Yeah.
Because what it looks like is the least important aspect of what we do. What it feels like is the most important aspect. And there's almost no way to translate that in social media. And
this is a big topic within not only like within all music fields right now. Like I hear everyone talking about it. But speaking about like, because you were going back in time, you were like interested with latex and things as early on and the looks and goth and Sailor Moon and, experience all kinds of genres also. And actually, when this episode is out, you're soon playing at Club Verboten.
Yeah.
So you have this connection also with the kink scene. Do Do you attend both techno clubs and kink clubs yourself?
So for me, you know, having this background in the goth industrial scene, I guess is what really colors my persona in that way. You know, for a long time, it was not clear that this alternative clubbing style was going to survive and continue to exist, you know, like techno culture and kink culture were not the same thing. And so it was funny because for a very long time, I felt that I was the one that needed to, you know, make sure that this fetish culture like survived and was connected to music, and because this was the world that I wanted to be in, right? And then, you know, over time, you know, I went from playing industrial to playing tech house to playing electro house and all of these genres that evolved over time. And so when dark techno sort of came back and this kind of connection with the kink scene sort of naturally evolved, I was like, oh, great. I'm so glad this is happening, and it's not just, you know, not just my responsibility to try to make this happen, because I was doing like techno, industrial, and like, you know, kind of style crossover parties like back in like 2008 and stuff. But I just didn't know that this was going to become such a phenomenon. But I came to Berlin for the first time in 2008, and I went to Berghain, and I was like, oh yeah, I know all about clubs like this, like, let's see what they got. And of course, it blew my mind. And so, you know, that just became a big aspect of who I am as an artist, because that's just where I want to be. You know, that's what I want to see. That's what I want to play to. These are my people. This is the mood. This is the look. And so for me, you know, like, I'm at the club to dance. I love music. I love outfits. I like looking. I love sexy people. And so, I would say that I'm more of like a techno club girl, but I want to do that in like a kink atmosphere, right? For me, like, I don't feel super comfortable engaging at the club in that way, especially since I've become more of like a known person, because there's just, you know, it's just like people, it's my place of work. Yeah. You know, I see the club as my place of work, and I do feel like I don't just feel comfortable just like doing whatever.
But it's a good mask.
Yeah, right. But it's a great place to meet, you know, and it's a great place to get to know people, and then maybe we can go like somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I believe in the kink scene, and I believe that it needs to be fostered and preserved. And I'm just so glad that that's a thing that just happened, you know? And so, yeah, I would say I'm definitely more of like a techno club girl than a kink scene girl, but it's still the same look and feel, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell us something about you that no one knows? Well, like, maybe your mom knows. Your close friends or whatever, but that... Yeah.
You know, I can be pretty shy. I'm not super outgoing, and I think that in my life, I've relied a lot on either doing something really interesting or like having a look to sort of draw people to me, because I think I always felt a little unsure to kind of reach out. I think that when I was younger, I just felt very ugly and just was like not very well embodied. I also experienced a lot of dysmorphia as a child.
What is that again?
Just kind of feeling like my body and my self image were not in line. I definitely experienced a lot of sense that I should be a boy or more masculine, and I was my sense, my physical self, even when I was younger, was like really not matching up with that. And so it took some time to sort of work through that. I mean, this was way before people were talking about gender identity in general. I was just like into anime and like thought that I should be like 7 foot tall and like super skinny and just like, you know, in like a way that I wasn't. And so it took a lot of time to kind of not just like just to find something that I was comfortable with. And then sort of when the whole gender identity conversation sort of grew as part of this queer scene, I was like learning from it while also being in it, you know, and then like had moments where I was just like, okay, guys, I'm also part of this, you know, and like it can be scary, you know, to be a DJ, an artist, someone that other people see, have everyone being so honest about themselves around you, and then realizing that you also have something to say, but being afraid to say it or not sure what it is, and like learning while being in public in a way. And so that has always been just something that is part of my personal development.
And you also create queer parties yourself. Like, what's your view on safe spaces and what does it take to be a safe space?
I think that the term safe space is difficult because ultimately, like, we can't promise safety to people. And so I like to use the term safer spaces. Because yes, definitely we need to create alternative spaces. I mean, everyone deserves to have a space where they feel at home. And I was cradled by spaces like that growing up. And so, you know, I think that right now there's a lot of ways that the industry has kind of figured out, or not the industry, but these kind of parties have figured out, you know, like awareness teams and monitoring and stuff like that. But you know, for the parties that we do, I think the most important aspect of creating a safer space is actually being very intimately connected with and aware of who is at your event and what they do and what they're doing and what they need and what they want. And I think that that's something that we've actually been criticized for because people maybe consider it to be too exclusive or just kind of like a little bit too like on top of people. But unfortunately, you know, a lot of these spaces have become a free-for-all for dangerous narcissistic behavior and abuse of substances and all kinds of abuse, really. And it can be painful and really socially uncomfortable to have to separate people from the event and stuff like that. But I think that in the long term, it has allowed us to create a space that we are truly in control of and that benefits those who can accept the rules. You know, it's like the same thing at Berghain. You can do anything you want except for all those things that you can't do. And we won't tell you what they are, but you're going to figure them out. And we really learned a lot from clubs like that about how to fine tune all of these parameters to kind of create what seems like a controlled chaos, but is actually just like a community, a functioning community. You know, I think that unfortunately the word community gets thrown around a lot, mostly just to get something or be against someone else. And it's important to really just be in touch with the people that you're creating space for so that you can actually protect them. And that's something that we deal with all the time. It gets crazy sometimes. It's a lot of work. But if you want to create the space that you want to see, for me, that's the work that needs to be done. Yeah. And that's the kind of, you know, we create the community that we want to be a part of. And that's just it. That's the work.
Do you believe in having the rules written and up people's faces, or do you believe more in finding out as you go?
You know, I struggle with that myself because on one hand, these posters and everything is so didactic and all these rules are like very aggressive. And, you know, it's like, because it wasn't like that when I was young, I'm like, why does it have to be this way? But I also understand that like electronic music has grown beyond sort of like, you know, in the past, like if you got into these scenes, you were really like about it and you kind of had like a mentorship or some sort of growth into it that sort of like showed you the ropes. But I think that there's just so many people getting into it now that that's not really feasible. Like people just show up because they heard about it. You know, I mean, Berlin is so legendary for this club scene. People are like, you know, YouTube how to get into Berghain and like, you know, follow some silly rules. So you don't really have that like social conditioning as you used to being part of a subculture. I mean, I wouldn't even say subculture really exists anymore because, you know, any sort of trend or style is immediately promoted and co-opted by the wider internet. So that's where the social breakdown comes. And so that's kind of why we end up needing posted rules, because the people coming to these events are not necessarily part of our social fabric. And so I get it. I wish that there was a way to be softer, to be more gentle, to be more kind of welcoming. But apparently people need sometimes to be like knocked on a little bit to get it. And I do think that it has been effective. You know, for example, even like when I started becoming more known, I would feel uncomfortable because people would come up to me on the dance floor. I'm literally in the middle of dancing and people are like, hey, excuse me. And then like start talking your ear off and you're like, I was what?
Rude.
Right, rude. And thankfully, like, you know, the messaging has become such that now people sort of know how to not to do that. You know, they're like, don't bother people on the dance floor. Don't bother girls. Don't touch girls, you know, if you don't know them, especially. So in one sense, that sort of like didactic internet kind of like presence has definitely made things better. So maybe that's just what needs to happen because of how many people are just kind of getting into it freshly.
What kind of changes would you wish to see in the future?
I mean, I think it's really important that we really need to start working together beyond just to have a party, you know? I mean, in the United States right now, we're experiencing a rollback of basic human rights that is unimaginable. And besides sort of like internet posting activism and donating, you know, poor people donating their money back and forth. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of social media has kind of trapped people into fighting with each other as opposed to realizing that as a class, we need to be, you know, like struggling upwards, like against the same target. Yeah, we need to be working together against these forces that are very organized and have been very working against us for a long time. Because we're just going to keep losing rights and you can't just like party that away. So we're really getting to a point where people need to kind of wake up and get organized and like really be that community that we all claim to be in order to literally protect our people and to protect our rights.
Well said.
Thank you.
Boom. Get a little teary because yeah, it's so important.
It's either this or it's that. This is this or that.
Front row raver or backstage dancer?
You know, I love a backstage, but I'm also a front row raver. I would say mostly I'm a front row raver.
Anarchism or monarchy? So easy. No.
I mean, anarchy, yeah. You know, being American, I don't really even know what monarchy is about. So
True.
Definitely anarchy.
Film The Craft or Harry Potter?
The Craft.
I mean, I was thinking
we are the weirdos, mister.
I think that was one of 3 movies I had at home when I grew up.
Sure.
My cousins always say they're like, we always watched The Craft when we were at your place. I was like, that's the only movie, but it was so fun. And I thought about it when I've been reading about or like your interviews and stuff. I was like,
I was really obsessed with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and like all sorts of like fantasy kind of dark glamour fantasy shows and things like that for sure.
So fun. Only beer or what comes your way along the night?
Real talk. What comes along the way during the night has definitely been my MO. And it's also something that I really had to kind of learn how to reel in as I became a public persona. Because, you know, when you're a DJ, people will just start offering you stuff, like everything, all the time. And I just love to say yes. And I mean, my friends to this day, they know this about me. I just say yes. And so that's something that I always need to like keep in check for myself. And just kind of as I became more of an adult, had to learn what really worked and was not working for me.
Learning the lessons.
Yeah.
Sometimes
in a very public way.
Daytime or nighttime clubbing?
Nighttime clubbing, for sure.
Bagels or New York pizza? Slices.
Well, a New York bagel is really something special.
Airports or train stations?
You know, I have almost no experience using train stations, but I can't say that I like airports. It's just part of the job. At least it gets you there quickly.
Big city vacation or into the wild?
I'm more of a city girl. Yeah, I've never been, I mean, I appreciate nature more now, I guess, as I'm getting older, but I'm definitely never been a rustic girl.
No. Okay, so now, thank you so much. Now we have some assumptions that is just like, it can go west. I've never met you before, so it's the first time. So, you believe the darker month of the year makes you stronger?
No.
No, that's one was wrong. You would never be friend with the person who uses the phrase love and light. Sending you love and light.
Yeah, that's about right.
As a teenager, you were the person at the party who pierced people's navel with a needle.
I was not that extreme. But my friends were.
All right, so you were in the crew, but not the needle carrier.
Yeah.
You have started stalking an ex, but lost interest after half an hour.
No, if I'm going to stalk, it's probably for the next several years.
Wild. You think about going off the grid once a month, but your manager keeps encouraging you to stay online.
That sounds about right.
People who know you would describe you as tormented, soft, and hardcore.
Depends on how well they know me.
How well must they know you?
I mean, if they know me pretty well, like those could apply.
Oh, fun. That was all. I feel it was like 50-50.
Yeah.
But that's still good.
Sure.
I'm okay. You passed.
Right.
I passed, and you could have said anything and you still pass. Thank you so much.
Thank you.